lawyer Daimel used to be a non-violent man who wouldn't even harm a snail. But now, he finds himself dumping a shredded body into a lake. 3 months earlier, Daimel helped his client Murat escape with a light sentence after a failed jewelry store robbery. His main client, however, is Dragan, a ruthless mafia boss. Daimel spends most of his time cleaning up Dragan's messes and managing his illegal operations, keeping the gang out of prison. This demanding work takes a toll on Daimel's personal life. He's always late getting home, leaving his wife, Katerina, frustrated. Their daughter, Emily, cried to sleep as she waits for her father on her 4th birthday, which Daimel misses. Katerina urges him to change for Emily's sake and suggests he join a mindfulness program led by Joschka Breitner. Daimel knows his life is falling apart. His marriage is on the rocks, he hates his job, and his firm doesn't value him. Even the secretary constantly reminds him of his low status. Feeling hopeless, Daimel reluctantly agrees to try the mindfulness program for his daughter. He's 20 minutes late to his first session but decides to stay. Breitner explains mindful living and helps Daimel identify the sources of his stress. For the first time, Daimel realizes he's spent his life rushing through problems without pausing to reflect. Breitner teaches him breathing exercises to stay calm and encourages him to make time for what truly matters. Over the next few weeks, Daimel starts making changes. He spends more time with Emily, ignores work calls during family moments, and moves out temporarily to focus on himself. Katerina notices his effort and is pleased with his progress. For the first time, Daimel feels like he's regaining control of his chaotic life. All Katerina wants is for Daimel to be the man she fell in love with again. At work, Daimel takes breaks and stops letting work stress overwhelm him. Soon, he completes the first part of his mindfulness journey, and Breitner gives him an advance copy of his book to encourage him. That weekend, Daimel picks up his daughter, Emily, for a trip to the lake house. Emily is thrilled to spend time with her dad, but Katerina is worried. She gives Daimel a list of rules and firmly reminds him that their daughter cannot be exposed to any of his mafia business. On the way to the lake house, Dragan calls. Since the lake house belongs to Dragan, Daimel answers, worried that Dragan might back out of letting them stay. Instead, Dragan demands that Daimel return to the office immediately because of a crisis. Back at the office, Daimel gets into another argument with the secretary, Ms. Bregens, but this time he stands up for himself. After leaving Emily with a trainee, he takes the elevator to the building's secret basement to meet Dragan and his men. Dragan explains that he has killed someone in front of 50 students on a school bus who recorded the entire incident. The trouble started when someone named Tony told Dragan that Boris, a rival gang leader, was encroaching on his territory. Dragan went to investigate and found Boris's right-hand man, Igor, talking to a drug mule. Things escalated, and Igor ended up beaten and burned to death. Only later does Dragan realize that Igor wasn't trying to take over his territory, he was just there to buy a grenade. With so much evidence against him, there is no way to keep Dragan out of jail. Daimel suggests that Dragan turn himself in to avoid angering Boris, but Dragan refuses. Instead, he decides to flee and demands that Daimel take him to the lake house, using Emily as cover. When Daimel hesitates, Dragan threatens him and tells him to meet in the parking lot. Using the mindfulness techniques he learned from Breitner, Daimel stays calm and decides to go along with the plan for now. The police, led by Eggman, are searching for Dragan. Eggman went to school with Daimel and Mahler. Her colleague concerns that would cause a possible conflict of interest. Eggman brushes it off, saying it's not an issue. Meanwhile, Daimel picks up Emily from the trainee and distracts her with ice cream while sneaking Dragan into the trunk of his car. As he's leaving the building, he runs into Mahler, who asks to search the car. Daimel uses his legal knowledge to avoid the search, even joking that Dragan is in the trunk. Mahler laughs and lets him leave. Shortly after, Eggman calls Daimel, asking him to convince Dragan to turn himself in. Daimel pretends he doesn't know what she's talking about and uses Emily as an excuse to cut the conversation short. Emily remains clueless that her dad is hiding a wanted criminal in the car. When they arrive at the lake house, Daimel focuses on spending quality time with his daughter. He deliberately forgets about Dragan, leaving him locked in the boot. Dragan dies from the heat. The next morning, Daimel and Emily enjoy breakfast and some swimming before driving back to the city. Emily notices a strange smell in the car, but Daimel brushes it off. After dropping Emily off with her mother, Katerina, Daimel checks his phone and sees several missed calls and messages. He ignores them. Before he can leave, Tony, Dragan's second in command, shows up with another man. They ask where Dragan is. But Daimel claims he can't say for safety reasons. Instead, they ask him to pass on Dragan's instructions, as their gang is on the verge of a turf war and needs leadership. With that out of the way, Daimel turns his attention to the bigger problem, disposing of Dragan's body. He drives back to the lake house and parks in the shed. Taking the body out of the car, he fights back nausea while figuring out what to do next. Disposing of a body is something he's never done before, so it takes him a while to come up with a plan. Daimel uses Breitner's mindfulness techniques to stay calm and focused. He chops up Dragan's body, runs the pieces through a wood chipper, and dumps them into the lake. However, he keeps Dragan's ring finger and thumb to use for fingerprint signature documents. Meanwhile, back in the city, Muller assumes Daimel is innocent. He shows Eggman photos of Daimel and his daughter enjoying time at the lake house. There's no sign of Dragan, so nothing seems suspicious. At the lake house, Daimel burns his clothes and Dragan's belongings to erase any evidence. He sits down with a cold beer, reflecting on his actions. Surprisingly, he feels at peace, believing he did the right thing by killing Dragan. While he's enjoying his drink, a bird swoops in and snatches Dragan's ring finger, which he had left aside. The next day, Daimel tries to keep things normal by sticking to his routine but decides to take the subway instead of using his car. He stays calm, even when the news about Dragan is everywhere. Murat calls and insists they meet at the game reserve to discuss Dragan. He refuses to talk over the phone. Meanwhile, Tony is getting very angry as Daimel continues avoiding his calls. At the office, Bregens directs Daimel to a meeting with 3 senior partners. They scold him for bringing his daughter to work and for his attack on Bregens. Daimel knows they're looking for an excuse to fire him, but he stays calm, following Breitner's advice, and lets them rant. Finally, he's had enough and turns the situation to his advantage. He points out that the firm has been profiting from Dragan's illegal businesses and that, since he's not a partner, the firm is fully responsible for those dealings. He adds that firing Dragan's favorite lawyer would anger the mob boss. Daimel proposes a deal: they terminate his contract, let him finish the month, and pay him a generous severance package. In return, he'll take Dragan as his personal client, have him sign an NDA, and ensure the firm is never implicated in Dragan's affairs. As the partners consider his proposal, Daimel clears out his office, makes copies of Dragan's documents, and takes Dragan's power of attorney. Ignoring Tony's calls once again, he leaves. Frustrated, Tony sends Sasha to confront him. The partners call Daimel to confirm they've accepted his terms and ask him to come in to sign the agreement. On his way home, Sasha confronts him, demanding he contact Dragan about the escalating turf war. At home, Daimel works on making a mold of Dragan's thumb because it will eventually be ruined. It's tricky, but he manages. Exhausted, he falls asleep, only to be woken up by a call from Katrina. She wants to meet the next day to talk about preschool options for their daughter, Emily. She is surprised when Daimel agrees instantly. Katrina also asks him to check if Emily's forgotten toy is in his car. Daimel finds the toy. It's a plush parrot that can record voices. He decides to use it to record a confession. Soon after, he gets a voice message from Murat, reminding him about their meeting at the game reserve. Ignoring Tony's calls, Daimel rushes to the reserve but is shocked to find the police there. Murat was shot while waiting for him. Eggman pulls him aside, warning that the situation is bad. She believes Boris killed Murat and that Dragan is still on the run. She subtly hints she knows about Dimel's trip to Dragan's lake house and mentions the possibility of searching his apartment. Daimel struggles to stay calm but races home afterward. As he figures out how to get rid of Dragan's thumb, Tony unexpectedly shows up with his dog. Daimel panics and tries flushing the thumb down the toilet, but it won't go. He hides it in his pocket, but the dog starts sniffing him. While Tony steps into the bathroom, Daimel feeds the thumb to the dog. When Tony finishes using the bathroom, he threatens to kill Daimel if he doesn't hear from Dragan soon. Meanwhile, somewhere else, the bird that stole Dragon's ring finger drops it into a cup at a random restaurant. Daimel goes to see Katharina and Emily. Emily is still excited about their weekend at the lake house and talks about it non-stop. Daimel is happy to hear this, but he knows there was more to that weekend than just fun. Katharina brings up Emily's preschool situation. All the nearby kindergartens have rejected her. She shows Daimel one of the letters, where the school says they won't accept a lawyer whose client tried to turn the school into a brothel. Katharina gives him an ultimatum: fix this in 3 days or she and Emily will move in with her mother. Daimel drives to the kindergarten, but they refuse to talk to him. After being turned away, he investigates the school and discovers that the directors are turning old tires into eco-friendly streetwear, but they use factories that employ child labor. Daimel meets Sasha at a playground to show him Dragon's message. He circles some words in a newspaper and adds Dragon's fingerprints to make the message seem real. Sasha expresses concern that Tony may have set up Dragon by feeding him false information, leading to the turf war. Sasha thinks Murat was killed because he knew too much and was ready to talk to Daimel. Sasha also says that Tony often brags about having a cop works for him. Daimel shows him the message. Sasha is surprised that Dragon is focused on a kindergarten with the turf war is going on. Daimel suggests that Dragon may be thinking long-term. He believes it would be more profitable to keep the kindergarten running until they get a permit to turn it into a brothel. Sasha agrees to follow Dragon's instructions, even thinking his own kids could go to the school. After meeting Sasha, Daimel sends a message to Tony, telling him Dragon is at Ms. Brigans' house. He then heads to the office to sign the agreement with the 3 partners. He shows them Dragon's fake signature, and they don't suspect anything. On his way out, Daimel sees staff members helping Ms. Brigans after she fainted. The police had called to say a grenade had been thrown into her apartment. Tony calls Daimel and insists they need to meet. Daimel finds Tony waiting for him outside the building. Tony threatens him, but Daimel stays calm. Daimel asks how the police found Ms. Brigans' address since he only gave that information to Tony. Tony says the police may have hacked their phones, but after Tony threatens Daimel's daughter, Daimel gets mad. He reminds Tony that Dragon is the boss and Tony needs to wait for Dragon's orders. Tony warns that if Daimel is lying, he will kill both him and Emily. Meanwhile, Eggman and Mahler arrive at Ms. Brigans' house. Eggman gets a call informing her that Dragon's ring finger has been found. She excitedly tells Mahler, realizing this could be the break they've been waiting for. They now suspect Dragon might be dead, not just missing. At the same time, Sasha and Daimel meet at the kindergarten. Daimel shares his suspicions about Tony and the grenade attack at Brigans' house. The two meet with the school directors and pressure them to sell their shares to Dragon's company. The directors initially refuse, but after some violence and a hacking of their systems, they agree to Daimel's demands. After closing the deal, Daimel calls Katharina to share the good news. However, before he can explain much, a group of masked men attack him and Sasha and take them away.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more videos like this.